Welcome. You have arrived at a quiet threshold, not a place of answers, but of questions. Let the day fade. Let the world outside dim. This is a space not for conclusions, but for wondering, softly, gently, without urgency. We live our lives surrounded by noise, but here we invite silence, stillness, space. What follows is not a lecture. It is not a lesson, a meander through ideas that have no fixed destination. The path will take us through consciousness and identity, through time, through meaning, through life and death. You are not expected to remember everything. You are not required to agree with anything, to drift, to rest, breathe, and let the questions begin. What does it mean to know anything at all? To feel, to be real? Some questions do not just ask for answers. They break the frame we use to ask them. They dig beneath science, challenge logic, and unearth the raw uncertainty beneath our most basic assumptions. Today, we explore 5 ideas that push the boundaries of understanding, consciousness, morality, free will, reality itself, and the ethics of artificial minds. These are not solved problems. They are open wounds in the fabric of philosophy, and by stepping into them, we learn not just about the world but about what it means to be the kind of thing that asks questions at all. The problem of consciousness. What is it like to be you? Not just the facts of your body or the thoughts you can describe, but the inner texture of your experience. The redness of a sunset, they are experiences, and they are the starting point for one of the deepest puzzles in all of philosophy. The problem of consciousness, more specifically, the hard problem of consciousness, as philosopher David Chalmers called it. We know the brain is a biological machine. We can measure its activity with scanners. We can locate which areas light up when we see colors, or hear music, or feel fear. But there remains a vast, mysterious gap between this physical data and what it is like to be a person. No matter how much you measure someone's brain, science has gotten very good at solving the easy problems of consciousness. How we process stimuli, store memories, or coordinate movement. But the hard problem asks a question that seems to defy physical description. Why does any of this result in experience at all? Why is the brain not just running in the dark, like a computer without a screen? Why should the flicker of neurons create a sense of being, of self-awareness, of an inner world? The term qualia describes these subjective pieces of experience of texture of red. The sound of a violin, the feeling of nostalgia. These are not external things. You cannot point to them in a lab. You cannot transfer them between people, and yet your life is built out of them. They are your reality, your private theater that no one else sees. Philosophers have proposed many theories to explain how consciousness could arise. One of the oldest and most enduring is physicalism, the belief that everything, including consciousness, arises from physical matter. In this view, consciousness is a product of neurons firing in complex ways, just as sound is a product of vibrating air. According to this view, if we had perfect knowledge of the brain, we could, in theory, explain every feeling, thought, and desire. But physicalism faces a stubborn challenge. You can describe brain processes in excruciating detail and still not explain why they feel like anything. Even if you mapped every molecule in someone's brain while they watched a sunset, you would not have the feeling of watching it yourself. The data would never become experience. That is where dualism enters the scene. Dualism says that the mind and the body are fundamentally different kinds of things. The brain is physical. The mind is not. Descartes, the most famous dualist. This view preserves the mystery of consciousness as something distinct from the physical world, but it also raises a big problem. How do these two realms interact? If the mind is not made of matter, how do neurons trigger a non-physical mind, or vice versa? It is like saying a ghost can type on a keyboard. It might feel intuitive, but it lacks a clear mechanism. More recently, a different idea has gained attention: panpsychism. This view holds that consciousness is not an emergent feature of complexity, but a fundamental property of the universe, like mass or charge. In other words, everything has some degree of inner experience. An electron, most of them lack the structure to do anything complex with it. But consciousness, in this view, is baked into reality itself. This sounds wild at first, almost like spiritual mysticism sneaking into science. But consider this. Science has never told us what matter is. We describe its behavior, how it moves, how it reacts, how it transforms. Maybe the inner side of matter is what we call consciousness. It means that everything might have a tiny spark of subjectivity, and when you combine billions of those sparks in the right way, like in a human brain, you get what we call a mind. Still, for most scientists, it does not offer predictions or experiments. It feels like painting the mystery with different colors, not solving it. To get a better grip on the mystery, philosophers often turn to thought experiments. One famous example is called Mary's room. Mary is a brilliant scientist who has lived her entire life in a black and white room. She has never seen color. She understands the physics of light, the biology of the retina. Then one day, she leaves the room. The question is, did she learn something new? If she did, it means there is a kind of knowledge, experiential knowledge. She had all the objective data, but not the subjective feeling. And that is the core of the problem. Another thought experiment. What if you built a robot that behaved just like a human? It says, I feel pain when you damage it. But does it actually feel anything? Or is it just simulating the appearance of feeling? And if we cannot tell the difference, or take Thomas Nagel's famous essay, he argues that even if we knew everything about a bat's biology and behavior, we would still never know what it is like to be one. Consciousness is inherently first person. It cannot be fully translated into objective terms. That is why it remains so elusive. But this is not just academic. Consciousness has real-world implications. If we do not understand what it is, we cannot say for sure who or what has it. Do animals feel pain the way we do? Can an artificial intelligence be sentient? If we ever build conscious machines, will they have rights? Will it be moral to turn them off? Even in medicine, the limits of consciousness shape our ethics. How do we treat patients in comas? What does it mean to be minimally conscious? At what point does awareness vanish and beyond science and ethics? Consciousness cuts to the core of personal meaning. If you are just a biological machine running on code, does your love mean less? Or does knowing the mystery only deepen its value? The truth is, we still do not know why consciousness exists at all. We know that without it, nothing would matter. The entire world would be a blank page, but we do not know how or why the page lights up. Maybe we never will. But in asking the question, we step closer to the very edge of what it means to be alive. The ethics of artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is no longer a concept of the future or a speculative idea confined to science fiction. It is an active force embedded in the fabric of modern life. It navigates our roads through autonomous vehicles. It curates what we see on social media. It translates languages in real time. It assists doctors in diagnosing diseases. It even writes essays, composes music, and predicts crimes before they occur. The systems that drive these functions are complex, dynamic, and increasingly autonomous. As they become more capable, the ethical questions surrounding their use grow more urgent. These questions are not theoretical. They are practical, immediate, and deeply human. They concern justice. At the heart of AI ethics is a fundamental paradox. These systems are designed by people and deployed in human environments, yet they operate without human intuition, without empathy, and often without transparency. This raises profound concerns about responsibility. When an autonomous system causes harm, who is accountable? Consider a self-driving car that makes a fatal error. The company that built the software? The owner of the car? Or does responsibility somehow dissolve when decision-making is distributed across code, sensors, and probabilistic models? Legal systems built around human agency struggle to assign blame in these cases. The moral vacuum that emerges leaves victims without justice and developers without clear obligations. This uncertainty creates a dangerous precedent in which power is divorced from accountability. Another major concern is the persistence and amplification of bias. AI systems learn from data, and data is a mirror of the world. It reflects not only facts. When a hiring algorithm is trained on past employment records, it may internalize patterns of gender or racial discrimination. When a predictive policing tool analyzes historical crime statistics, it may disproportionately target communities of color. These biases do not remain static. They are magnified, automated, and scaled across millions of lives. Worse still, many AI systems are black boxes. This lack of transparency makes it nearly impossible to detect or challenge unfair decisions. Bias becomes not only embedded, but invisible. The question of dignity. As AI becomes more human-like in its presentations through voice assistants, humanoid robots, and interactive avatars, it begins to mediate relationships that were once purely human. Robots are now being used to care for the elderly, tutor children, and provide emotional companionship. These systems can offer real comfort, especially where human care is unavailable. But they also risk substituting authenticity with simulation. When a machine mimics empathy, if people form emotional bonds with machines, are we creating tools to assist? These questions strike at the core of what it means to be human in an increasingly artificial world. Philosophers like Shannon Valor have argued that ethical AI requires more than regulatory frameworks or technical safeguards. It demands a cultivation of moral character, what she calls technomoral virtues. These include transparency, so that people can understand how decisions are made, accountability, so that harms can be addressed, humility, so that designers recognize the limits of their models, and compassion, so that systems serve real human needs rather than abstract efficiency. Without these virtues, the ethics of AI also confronts the spectre of displacement. As machines perform tasks once done by humans, entire professions are being transformed or eliminated. Truck drivers, translators, legal clerks, customer service agents, and even teachers face replacement by automation. This shift raises urgent questions about identity and purpose. Work has long been a source of meaning, structure, and social connection. If AI severs that link, how do we ensure that displaced workers are not merely unemployed, but empowered to find new forms of contribution and community? These questions are not merely economic, they are existential. The conversation grows even more unsettling when it turns to superintelligence. Some researchers foresee a future where artificial general intelligence surpasses human intelligence in every domain. This is not just about speed or memory. It is about strategic reasoning. If such a system emerges, and its goals are even slightly misaligned with human values, the consequences could be catastrophic. Unlike a malicious human actor, it need only be indifferent. Indifference at such a scale could lead to outcomes where human welfare is sidelined in the pursuit of arbitrary or unintended goals. Nick Bostrom and others have warned that aligning such systems with human values is one of the most pressing challenges of our time. But what values are those? Who defines them? And how can they be codified in ways a machine can understand and preserve? These are not simply technical puzzles. They are philosophical inquiries, deeply entwined with questions about morality. They force us to confront the diversity of human belief and the difficulty of achieving consensus on what is good, fair, or just. The AI alignment problem is not only about machines understanding humans, it's also about humans understanding themselves. But ethical concerns are not confined to hypothetical futures. They are already here, embedded in the systems we use every day. Governments employ facial recognition to surveil public spaces, often without consent or oversight. Corporations use predictive analytics, often manipulating attention and desire in ways that are invisible but powerful. Schools use algorithms to evaluate student performance, often penalizing those who do not fit conventional patterns. Banks use machine learning to approve or deny credit, sometimes reproducing long-standing financial discrimination. In each of these cases, the people affected have little insight into how those decisions were made, and even less power to challenge them. The ethics of artificial intelligence is ultimately a struggle for agency. It is a call to ensure that the tools we create reflect the values we profess, that they serve human dignity, that they promote fairness rather than replicate injustice, and that they empower individuals rather than reduce them to data points in a profit-maximizing algorithm. It is a call to ask, again and again, the most fundamental of ethical questions. Technology is not destiny. It is a tool. It extends our reach, but it does not determine them. The values we embed in our machines, and in the age of artificial intelligence, the task before us is not only to build more intelligent machines, but to become more ethically intelligent humans. Our future will be shaped not only by what we design, but by what we believe. Not only by what machines can do, but by what we choose to let them do, and why. The ethics of artificial intelligence is not a debate to be had by experts alone. It is a conversation that must involve all of us, for it concerns all of us. It is about the future of agency, the future of responsibility, and the future of what it means to be human in a world increasingly shaped by non-human minds. Free will and determinism. Do you choose your actions, or are they chosen for you? Every time you make a decision, there is an invisible question hovering underneath. Was that truly your choice? Or was it just the next domino falling? Determinism says the latter. It holds that every event, every decision, every action is the inevitable outcome of prior causes. There is no gap where pure freedom enters the picture, just cause and effect. According to determinism, you could predict every future event, including the motion of stars and the flicker of your thoughts. This idea is not just philosophy, it is embedded in physics. From Newton's clockwork universe to Laplace's daemona, theoretical intellect. Nor you, more recently. In the 1980s, the brain had already decided before the subject was aware of their decision. Later studies pushed the window of unconscious decision-making even further, suggesting that what we think of as choice might be more like post hoc justification for a process that started in the shadows of the brain. But this idea is deeply unsettling. If we are not the authors of our actions, how can we be praised for heroism or blamed for cruelty if everything we do was inevitable all along? This is where the debate over free will ignites into urgency. Libertarian free will. It says, we do have the power to choose. There is a fork in the road, and we can genuinely take either path. Without this freedom, concepts like moral accountability, personal growth, and even regret lose their meaning. If you had no choice but to act the way you did, then what is the point of guilt or redemption? Yet libertarianism faces a paradox. If our choices are not determined, if so, how is that any better? A random choice is not a free one, it is just uncaused. To escape the determinism, compatibilists argue that free will and determinism are not mutually exclusive. You are free, they say, when you act according to your desires, even if those desires have causes. Freedom does not require metaphysical magic, it requires internal coherence. If no one is forcing you, if you are not acting under duress or compulsion, then your action is free in all the ways that matter. This view, endorsed by thinkers like David Hume and Daniel Dennett, redefines freedom not as the absence of causation, but as the presence of autonomy within a determined framework. You are like a chess player bound by rules, but still able to plan, strategize, and take responsibility. And this is enough, they say, for ethics, for law, for society to function meaningfully. But not everyone is satisfied. Critics argue that compatibilism is just determinism wearing a mask. It changes the definition of freedom to fit the facts instead of challenging the facts. And it does not satisfy our deep, gut-level sense of what it feels like to choose, whether we have free will or not. The belief that we do shapes our world, Our legal system is based on the idea of responsibility. Our relationships depend on promises, trust, apologies. The entire concept of punishment or reward assumes agency. If you remove that foundation, what is left? And yet, maybe it is not all or nothing. Maybe freedom is a spectrum. Maybe we are more or less free, depending on our awareness, our self-control, our capacity to reflect. Maybe freedom is not a given but a goal, something we cultivate through consciousness and discipline. Maybe to be free is not to be uncaused, but to be awake to our causes and capable of responding wisely. In the end, the question of free will remains unresolved. But asking it forces us to look closely at who we are, how we live. Maybe that, too, is a kind of freedom. The nature of time. Time is something we experience in every moment of our lives, yet its nature remains elusive. We speak of wasting time, saving time. We remember moments with nostalgia or regret, anticipate the future with hope or fear, and anchor ourselves in the ever-fleeting present. A painful second drags on as if it will never end. Time feels tangible. This paradox is not just poetic, it is deeply philosophical and scientific. What is time, really? Is it a physical entity, or is it a feature of consciousness, a framework the mind imposes to make sense of experience and change? For most of human history, it repeated itself through the rhythm of the seasons, the phases of the moon, the movements of stars, the cycles of birth, death, and rebirth. Time was the wheel of existence. Only with the development of Western thought and the scientific revolution did time begin to be understood as linear straight arrow moving from a known past through a fleeting present into an unknown future. This shift was not just philosophical. It changed how societies viewed progress, memory, destiny, and history. It gave rise to modern notions of causality, but it also introduced new puzzles and paradoxes. With the advent of modern physics, our understanding of time underwent a dramatic transformation. In the early 20th century, Albert Einstein showed that time is not absolute. It does not tick at the same rate everywhere in the universe. Time is relative. It slows down near massive objects. A clock on a satellite ticks slightly faster than one on Earth. A twin traveling near the speed of light would age more slowly than their sibling who stayed home. These are not abstract ideas. They are measurable facts. Time is part of a four-dimensional continuum. Events are located not just in space. The idea of a universal present, what is simultaneous for one observer, this undermines our everyday intuitions and opens the door to radical new interpretations. One of the most provocative of these interpretations is the block universe theory. In this view, time does not flow. It simply is. The past, present, and future all exist together, like different parts of a landscape. From this perspective, the universe is a static, four-dimensional block. We do not move through time like a boat moves through water. Rather, we are extended in time, the same way we are extended in space. Every moment your birth, this moment of reading, your final breath. The sensation of time passing is an illusion generated by consciousness, a trick of our psychology. The flow of time is not a feature of the universe. But this raises further questions. If time does not flow, why can we remember the past? Why do causes precede effects, and not the other way around? This is where the study of entropy comes into play. According to the second law of thermodynamics, in a closed system, entropy, the measure of disorder, always increases over time. This tendency toward greater disorder gives time its direction. From a state of low entropy in the past, the universe moves to states of higher entropy. We remember the past because it was more ordered. We cannot remember the future because it has not yet unfolded into the disordered states from which memories can arise. Thus, it is not time that flows, but entropy that increases. Time's arrow may be rooted not in space-time itself, but in thermodynamics. Neuroscience offers another perspective. Our brains construct the experience of time under stress. In altered states of consciousness during meditation, on psychedelics, or in dreams, time can stretch, shrink, or vanish. People with certain brain injuries can lose the ability to sense the passage of time altogether. This suggests that time as we know it is not purely external. It is also internal, shaped by neural processes and mental structures. The present moment, the elusive now, may not correspond to a fixed point in physics, but to a mental snapshot constructed by the brain. If time is experienced differently by different minds, then what we call time might be as much about perception as about reality. Philosophers have long grappled with these dilemmas. J.M.E. McTaggart famously argued that time is unreal. He distinguished between two ways of ordering events: the A-series, which divides time into past, present, and future, and the B-series, which orders events as earlier than or later than each other. McTaggart claimed that the A-series is essential to our experience of time, but logically incoherent. Every event would have to be past, present, and future, which is contradictory. Therefore, he concluded, time as we experience it cannot exist. Other philosophers have taken up the debate with different conclusions. Presentists, the past no longer exists. Reality is a constantly moving spotlight, illuminating one moment at a time. Eternalists, by contrast, believe that all points in time are equally real. The past, present, and future are just different locations in a temporal dimension. We do not experience them all at once, but they all exist. Growing block theorists propose that the past and present are real, but the future is not. The universe is a block that grows with each passing moment. New events come into being as time progresses, but they are added to a fixed, growing history. In this view, time has a direction, because the block has an edge, the present where the future crystallizes into the past. These theories attempt to reconcile the subjective experience of time as flow with the objective descriptions of physics. Religious and spiritual traditions offer yet another lens. In Christianity, unfolding according to divine will, leading to a final judgment or ultimate fulfillment. In Hinduism and Buddhism, time is cyclical, governed by the rhythms of karma, samsara, and rebirth. Life is a loop, and liberation comes from transcending the illusion of time altogether. Enlightenment involves seeing through the apparent flow of events and realizing the timeless nature of the self. These perspectives Despite centuries of inquiry, time remains one of the most profound and persistent mysteries. We measure it with clocks, mark it with calendars, and structure our lives around its passage. We speak of it as a resource. Yet we do not fully understand what it is. Perhaps time is an illusion, but one so deep that we can never escape it. Perhaps it is real, but fundamentally different from how we perceive it. Perhaps we are not in time, but time is in us, woven into the fabric of our perception, our biology, and our consciousness. To ask what time is to ask what it means to change, to grow, to remember, and to die. It is to ask what it means to exist at all, whether time flows like a river, spirals like a wheel, or stands frozen in a cosmic block. It shapes every moment of our lives. It is both the backdrop and the substance of our story. And though we may never fully grasp its nature, we will always live within its grasp, searching for clarity in the moments it offers and the questions it leaves unanswered. The simulation hypothesis. Are we living in code? What if the world around youth, the very thoughts that form in your mind, are not real in the way you think, not illusory in the spiritual sense, but simulated in the most literal way, generated by computational processes beyond your comprehension, run on some hyper-advanced substrate by unknown entities? What if everything, your history, your feelings, the cosmos itself, is code? This is the premise of the simulation hypothesis, a radical idea that suggests our reality may be an elaborate, artificial construction, much like a video game, albeit with vastly greater complexity and fidelity. The hypothesis isn't mere science fiction anymore. Over the past 2 decades, technologists and philosophers, most famously philosopher Nick Bostrom, proposed in 2003 that at least one of the following must be true. First, that human civilization will almost certainly go extinct before reaching a post-human stage, capable of running realistic simulations of conscious beings. Second, that such civilizations, even if they reach that stage, will choose not to run simulations. Or third, and the third conclusion is jarring, not because it's intuitively plausible, but because, probabilistically, if many simulations exist and only one base reality exists, then the odds are overwhelmingly against us being in the original. To understand the seriousness with which this idea is now regarded, consider that even respected figures like Elon Musk have publicly supported the plausibility of the hypothesis. Musk once stated, "There's a 1,000,000,000 to 1 chance we're living in base reality," citing the exponential growth in computational power and the increasing realism of digital simulations. His reasoning: if it's possible to create perfectly realistic simulated worlds, and it becomes cheap enough, the number of simulated realities will vastly outstrip the number of real ones, so statistically, we are more likely to be in one of the latter. Yet, this is not a new concern. The suspicion that reality may not be what it seems stretches deep into philosophical history. In ancient Greece, Plato offered the allegory of the cave, describing prisoners who have lived chained in a cave all their lives, watching shadows projected on a wall. To them, the shadows are reality until one prisoner escapes and realizes the outside world exists. Centuries later, Descartes questioned whether he could be certain of anything at all. imagining a malevolent demon that could be deceiving his senses. Even earlier, in Vedic Hinduism, the concept of Maya taught that the world is not the ultimate reality, but a veil of illusion obscuring the truth of Brahman, the unchanging absolute. The simulation hypothesis, in many ways, is a modern reworking of these ancient doubts, repackaged in the language of computation and artificial intelligence. The question becomes more urgent as technology advances. Consider the trajectory of our digital capabilities. In less than a century, humanity has gone from rudimentary mechanical computers to smartphones more powerful than the computers that sent astronauts to the moon. Virtual reality has moved from clunky, pixelated experiments to near photorealistic environments with immersive sensory feedback. Artificial intelligence, once limited to rule-based systems, can now write essays, generate art, compose music, and simulate human conversation. Brain-computer interfaces like Neuralink promise the eventual fusion of biological minds and machine computation. If this curve continues, it's not just possible but arguably inevitable that future civilizations will have the power to simulate entire worlds, including beings with subjective experiences indistinguishable from our own. And yet, a troubling implication follows. If we ourselves are simulated, then our entire understanding of physics, of consciousness, of history, may be contingent on rules chosen by some higher architect. Perhaps what we think of as natural laws are merely rendering constraints or optimization shortcuts used to conserve processing power. Some physicists have even speculated about how we might detect such a scenario. Could there be pixels in space-time evidence of discreteness at the smallest scales? Might quantum phenomena like wave function collapse hint at a rendering engine that only simulates what is observed? Could cosmic rays arriving in regular patterns or unexplained constants in physics be signatures of artificial design? No definitive evidence has emerged. The hypothesis remains unfalsifiable, immune to proof or disproof. This places it in a strange epistemological category. Plausible, but untestable. It behaves like a metaphysical proposition. Critics argue that if a hypothesis cannot generate testable predictions, it doesn't belong in the domain of science. Others counter that the mere possibility invites valuable lines of thought about consciousness, ethics, and the future of technology. And if we are simulated, what? Then, are we less real than our creators? The simulation hypothesis forces us to re-examine the nature of consciousness itself. If what we call the self is a product of neuronal activity, and if that activity can be emulated digitally, then perhaps our thoughts and feelings do not rely on flesh, but on the structure and complexity of the information itself. In this view, this opens profound ethical questions. With the creators of our simulation, are we experiments, works of art, or simply emergent phenomena in a system they barely monitor? Do they intervene in our world as gods once did, or did they create our simulation, press, run, and move on? The simulation hypothesis is not just a metaphysical puzzle, it's a moral one. If the beings within a simulation are conscious, does the simulation's architect owe them anything? Some thinkers even propose that our yearning for meaning, our curiosity, creativity, and moral striving might be part of the simulation's intended function. Perhaps we are being tested not for our capacity to escape the simulation, but for our ability to live ethically within it. Maybe transcendence lies, but in responding to it with compassion, courage. Still, not everyone is convinced. Detractors suggest the hypothesis may be just a reflection of our cultural moment, an echo of our immersion in digital technology and disconnection from the natural world. In this view, it's the 21st century equivalent of religious cosmology, a grand narrative that places us in a larger framework, even as it disorients us. Others argue it's a distraction, a fascinating idea, but one that pulls attention away from real, tangible problems like climate change, inequality, and political instability. Whether or not we are simulated, but maybe that's the most meaningful takeaway. If our universe is a simulation, it doesn't diminish our experiences, it elevates them. A programmed act of kindness still ripples through the fabric of the world. Our stories, our search for meaning, they matter. Not because they are embedded in a base reality, but because they are experienced, interpreted, and remembered. In this view, the simulation hypothesis becomes less about despair and more about radical presence, about treating our fleeting moment, however it originated, with reverence. The simulation hypothesis doesn't pretend to offer easy answers. Instead, it sharpens the questions. What is real? What does it mean to know something? What obligations do we have to other minds, whether simulated or not? How should we act in a world that might be artificial, yet feels so deeply authentic? These are not just questions for philosophers or physicists. They are questions for anyone who has ever looked at the stars and wondered not just what they are, but who or what is watching from the other side of the screen. Take a breath. Let your body sink deeper into stillness. The questions can wait. Let them rest beside you like stones under soft water. You have journeyed through vast spaces, consciousness and cosmos, identity and time. Now let everything grow quiet. No answers, no analysis. The body softens. Thoughts drift by like lanterns, floating on a dark lake. You do not have to chase them. This is the space between, where breath is enough, where silence speaks. Stay here for as long as you like, and when you feel the pull to return, the next path will be waiting. Moral relativism. Imagine walking into a foreign land where the customs, values, and judgments are completely unlike your own. You witness a public ritual that, in your culture, would be condemned as barbaric, but here it is sacred. People participate with reverence and joy. Do you have the right to judge them? Or are you simply projecting your own moral upbringing onto a world you do not understand? At the heart of this moment is one of philosophy's most contentious and enduring debates. Is morality? Is there a universal right and wrong? Or are all ethical systems just human inventions, shaped by culture, history, and perspective? Moral relativism says, what is right or wrong depends on the time, place, and society. A practice deemed virtuous in one culture might be forbidden in another. In ancient Sparta, in some cultures, in others, private property is foundational. For the relativist, moral truths are local. This view has strong intuitive appeal. It fosters tolerance, humility, and the recognition that no culture has a monopoly on wisdom. It helps us avoid the arrogance of moral imperialism, idea that we should impose our values on others. When confronted with unfamiliar practices, the relativist says, different does not mean wrong. But relativism also runs into problems. If all morality is culturally determined, then we lose the ability to critique even the most egregious injustice. Can we say that slavery was wrong in societies that accepted it? Can we condemn genocide if moral truth is entirely subjective? The abolition of slavery, the recognition of women's rights, the fight for civil liberties, these would not be advances, just lateral moves on a cultural map. Enter moral objectivism, according to this view, but because they violate objective principles. These truths may be discovered through reason, but they do not change with fashion or geography. For the objectivist, objectivism underpins many global movements for justice, human rights, declarations, humanitarian laws, and ethical codes are often based on the belief that certain principles like dignity, freedom, and fairness apply to all people at all times. These are not suggestions. They are demands grounded in the idea that right and wrong are real. Philosophers have developed various forms of moral objectivism. Kant, for example, believed in a moral law grounded in reason. His categorical imperative says that you should act only according to principles that you would want to become universal laws. If lying were universalized, trust would collapse. So, lying is wrong not because your culture says so, but because it undermines rational cooperation. Other objectivists appeal to moral intuition and immediate sense of right and wrong. Just as we can see that a circle is round, these intuitions may be refined over time, but they start from a bedrock of common moral insight. Evolutionary psychologists, but objectivists, even if morality evolved, it can still point to real truths, just as our evolved ability to see does not mean that light is not real. Still, objectivism has its challenges. Different people reason differently. Cultures clash on foundational values. Even the most widely accepted principles like the value of life can lead to disagreement. Some believe capital punishment honors justice. Others see it as an inexcusable wrong. The relativist points to these disagreements as proof that morality is subjective. The objectivist responds that disagreement does not disprove truth. People once disagreed about the shape of the earth or the causes of disease, but truth did not vanish. It just took time to uncover. So where does that leave us? Perhaps the tension between relativism and objectivism, but learning when each perspective is most useful. Relativism reminds us to listen. Objectivism reminds us to stand firm against injustice, to believe in moral progress, to argue not just from preference, but from principle. Consider this. The idea that tolerance is better than hate, that is a moral position. Even relativism depends on some objective-seeming values. In trying to avoid dogma, we often smuggle it in through the back door. What is clear is this: we are global citizens, exposed to more diversity than any previous generation. Navigating this complexity requires more than slogans. It demands wisdom, empathy, and a willingness to wrestle with hard questions. When should we judge? When is tolerance a virtue, and when is it cowardice? These are not easy questions, but they are essential, because how we answer them will shape not just our opinions but our relationships. The debate between moral relativism and moral objectivism is not just academic. It lives in our headlines, and it reminds us that the search for right and wrong is, in the end, a search for what it means to be human. The paradox of identity, what makes you who you are, is one of the most persistent and puzzling questions in all of philosophy. It seems straightforward. At first, you have a name. You remember your childhood. You recognize yourself in the mirror. You tell stories about your life. You feel continuity from one day to the next. This sense of stability gives coherence to your existence. But when you start to analyze it, the picture begins to blur. Are you the same person today that you were a decade ago? Are you your memories, your body, your personality, your consciousness, or something else altogether? If a part of you changes, does your identity remain intact? If everything changes, is anything left of you at all? This is the paradox of identity, the realization that the more we try to pin down the self, the more it seems to dissolve. It is a problem that spans cultures, religions, and eras. It challenges the foundations of ethics, law, psychology, and even everyday relationships. It reveals the fragility of the concept of a stable self, even as it affirms the deep human need to believe in one. A famous thought experiment illustrates the problem with startling clarity. Nor you. The ship of Theseus, originally posed by ancient Greek philosophers, asks us to imagine a ship whose wooden parts are replaced one by one over time. Eventually, every plank, every nail, every piece has been substituted. Is it still the same ship? And if the old parts are collected and reassembled into a new ship, which of the two is the real ship of Theseus? The original, the replacement? The question has no definitive answer, but it mirrors our own lives. Every cell in the human body is replaced over time. Our memories fade and mutate. Our beliefs, yet somehow we persist in believing that we are the same individual throughout it all. Another famous scenario deepens the confusion. Suppose you step into a teleportation device that scans your body in perfect detail, atom by atom. The person on Mars speaks like you, remembers your life, and feels like you. Is that person still you? If not, then something crucial must have been lost in the destruction of the original. But if yes, then your identity consists only in information and pattern, not in the specific matter that composes you. What if the original is not destroyed, and now there are two of you? Which one is the real you? These dilemmas force us to confront whether identity is tied to continuity, to consciousness, to memory, or to something else entirely. Some philosophers argue that personal identity hinges on memory. If you can remember being a certain person, this was the view of John Locke. But memory is fragile and unreliable. It can be created artificially. If memory can change, does that mean identity changes too? Others propose that bodily continuity is the key. You are the same person because you inhabit the same body, but this too is problematic. The brain itself rewires and regenerates. if nothing stays exactly the same? In many Eastern traditions, the answer is no. The self is not an entity, but a process. In Buddhism, there is no permanent, unchanging self only, a flow of mental and physical events. The illusion of self is what gives rise to attachment, suffering, and confusion. To see through the self is to begin the path to liberation. The self is like a flame visible. It flickers and flows, dependent on causes and conditions. In this view, clinging to identity is a root of suffering, not a source of stability. Western philosophy has also questioned the solidity of the self. David Hume could not locate a self among his thoughts and sensations. All he found was a bundle of perceptions. He concluded that the self is a fiction. Derek Parfit extended this line of thinking by arguing that what matters is not strict identity but psychological continuity and connectedness. If someone in the future has your memories, this undermines the need for a metaphysical self, while preserving the basis for concern, care, and moral responsibility. Yet the notion of identity continues to shape our social and legal institutions. We hold people responsible for promises they made years ago. We believe in personal growth, redemption. All of these depend on the idea that the person who acted in the past is the same person today. If the self is an illusion, if we change fundamentally over time, does that mean the person who once harmed us no longer exists? Can we forgive someone who has changed completely? Perhaps identity is not a fixed object, but a dynamic process. Like a river, it flows and changes, yet maintains a recognizable course. Like a flame, it persists. The self may be best understood not as a noun but as a verb. It is something we do, something we enact, through habits, relationships, choices, and reflection. Our identity emerges from the interplay of memory, intention, narrative, and embodiment. It is shaped by our past, grounded in the present. It is not a thing we possess, but a story we live. The paradox of identity touches something deep and universal. It confronts our fear of death. It challenges us to rethink what it means to be a person, and it suggests that perhaps the question of who we are has no final answer. It may be that the self is not an object to be discovered, but a mystery to be explored. And in asking the question again, the limits of human knowledge, how do human beings come to know anything at all? And what are the boundaries of that knowing? These are questions that do not go away. Knowledge is said to be power. It is linked to survival, to progress. And yet, the deeper one goes into the study of knowledge. For every answer that science or reason provides, more questions emerge. The frontier of knowledge always recedes, just as it is approached. This tension has preoccupied philosophers for centuries, and it continues to define the intellectual struggle of every thoughtful person. What do we truly know? What is merely belief or illusion? What lies forever beyond our grasp? The field of epistemology attempts to grapple with these questions. It is not merely an academic exercise. It cuts to the core of how people live and act in the world. At its center is the question of justification. What separates knowledge from mere opinion? The ancient skeptics, such as Pyrrho of Elis, took a radical position. They argued that certainty is unattainable. For every claim, for every appearance, a different interpretation can be proposed. Therefore, the wise person should suspend judgment. They called this practice. It was not a call to despair. By letting go of the need for certainty, they believed one could live more calmly, more attentively, and more freely. Centuries later, he set out to doubt everything he could, his senses. In doing so, he discovered one idea that could not be doubted: the fact that he was doubting. From this, he concluded that he must exist. Cogito ergo sum, I think. This became the foundation of modern philosophy. But even Descartes' famous statement has been challenged. It presumes that language and logic are reliable. It depends on concepts that may themselves be culturally shaped. Empiricist philosophers like John Locke and David Hume, they argued that all knowledge comes through sensory experience. The mind is a blank slate at birth, and all ideas are built from impressions. But the senses can be deceived. A mirage in the desert looks like water. A dream feels real. Even the connection between cause and effect. Hume pointed out that when one billiard ball strikes another, we see motion and contact, but not causation itself. We simply become accustomed to certain sequences. We expect the sun to rise, but that does not prove it will rise tomorrow. Induction. Immanuel Kant tried to resolve the conflict between empiricism and rationalism. He argued that while all knowledge begins with experience, it does not arise from experience alone. The mind plays an active role in shaping what we perceive. We do not see the world as it is, but as it is filtered through categories such as space, time, and causality. These are not properties of the external world, but structures imposed by the mind. This means that we can never access the world in itself. The noumenon, the thing. Human beings live inside a cognitive framework. They cannot escape it. They can only know appearances, not reality in its pure form. This insight had profound consequences. It suggested that even the most basic features of the world, time, space, object, cause, may not be universal truths, but conditions of human perception. Friedrich Nietzsche questioned whether truth is anything more than a useful fiction. He suggested that what people call knowledge is shaped by instincts. Michel Foucault explored how systems of knowledge are intertwined with power. What counts as truth often reflects who has the authority to define it. Knowledge is not neutral. It is situated. It is political. In the 20th century, Kierkegaard showed that in any formal system capable of doing arithmetic, there are true statements that cannot be proven within the system. This shattered the dream of a complete, self-contained foundation. In physics, the uncertainty principle introduced by Werner Heisenberg showed that, at the quantum level, certain properties cannot be simultaneously known with precision. The more accurately one measures a particle's position, it is a feature of reality itself. Nature at its core is indeterminate. As if these theoretical challenges were not enough, the digital age has added a new kind of uncertainty. Never before have human beings had so much access to information. Yet, information is not the same as knowledge. The internet provides instant answers, but it also generates confusion. Search engines retrieve what is popular. Algorithms reinforce existing beliefs. The line between fact and falsehood blurs. Misinformation spreads faster than correction. In this environment, knowledge becomes fragmented, contested, and vulnerable to manipulation. So what is to be done in the face of these limits? Some might conclude that truth is relative, or that nothing can be known at all, but this leads to paralysis. Others retreat into dogma, but philosophers have proposed a different response, one of intellectual humility. To know that you do not know is not weakness. It invites curiosity rather than arrogance. It encourages dialogue rather than domination. It allows knowledge to be provisional, contextual, and evolving. This kind of knowing does not aim to conquer the world, but to engage with it. Knowledge, in this view, is not a final product. It is a process. It is not about possessing answers. It is not a static structure. And because this conversation is always incomplete, it remains open to wonder. The boundaries of knowledge are not barriers. They are invitations. They remind people that they are part of a mystery far larger than themselves, that to seek understanding is not to eliminate uncertainty, but to live with it more deeply, more honestly, and more wisely. Even where certainty ends, meaning can begin, and in that, there may be more truth than knowledge ever promised to deliver. The meaning of life, why human beings exist at all, is one of the oldest and most persistent questions ever asked. It arises not only in moments of crises or wonder, but in the ordinary rhythms of daily life. A person looks up at the stars or watches someone they love fall asleep or faces the silence of a hospital room, and the question returns: why are we here? What is this for? What does it all mean? From the earliest myths to the most modern philosophies, people have searched for answers, some through religion, others through reason, art, service, or experience. Some find comfort in certainty, and some conclude that there may be no answer at all. Among modern thinkers, Jean-Paul Sartre argued that human existence has no predetermined essence or purpose. People are thrown into the world without a script. There is no divine blueprint or universal mission. Instead, people must create their own meaning through choice, action, and responsibility. This freedom is exhilarating but also terrifying. There are no excuses, no external authority to appeal to. There is only the burden and the beauty of becoming. To be human, in Sartre's view, is to be a project, a continual act of self-definition. Meaning is not given, it is made. Albert Camus, a fellow existentialist, offered a slightly different view. He described life as fundamentally absurd. People seek order, clarity, and purpose, but the universe remains silent. In his famous essay, The Myth of Sisyphus, only to watch it roll back down each time. This endless repetition seems futile. Yet Camus does not counsel despair. Instead, he invites defiance. If life has no ultimate meaning, then people are free to create their own. Camus ends with a striking image. One must imagine Sisyphus. In the very act of struggle, in the refusal to surrender, there is dignity, even joy. Religious traditions often offer a contrasting answer. For many believers, life has meaning because it is part of a divine plan. In Christianity, life is a gift from God, filled with moral purpose and eternal significance. Human beings are created in the image of God, called to love, to serve, to seek salvation. In Hinduism, life is one stage in a vast cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. The soul journeys through many forms, shaped by karma, until it reaches. In Buddhism, meaning is found in awakening. Life is marked by suffering, which arises from attachment. The goal is not to impose meaning, but to transcend illusion. Enlightenment involves seeing through the self, letting go of clinging, and dwelling in compassion and insight. For those who reject religious answers, humanism offers a secular alternative. It suggests that meaning does not come from the cosmos, from relationships, creativity, learning, kindness, and justice. These values are not eternal or cosmic, but they are deeply human. They give life structure and depth. A humanist might say that meaning lies in building a better world, in helping others flourish, in discovering what brings joy and beauty and truth. There is no guarantee that life matters beyond the grave, but it can matter immensely while it lasts. And yet the question remains unsettled. The size of the universe, the indifference of nature, the inevitability of defall, these can provoke doubt. If people are just a fleeting arrangement of atoms on a small planet in a vast, cold cosmos, does anything really matter? Nihilism answers no. It says that life has no inherent value or direction. Some embrace this conclusion as liberation, but nihilism itself does not end the conversation. In fact, it may deepen it. By stripping away illusions, it forces people to ask more urgently, what, then, will I live for? Viktor Frankl, a psychiatrist who survived the Holocaust, he observed that even in the most extreme suffering, people searched for purpose. His therapy, called logotherapy, people do not need a grand theory or a cosmic guarantee. They need a why. Frankl wrote that those who had a reason to live could endure almost anyhow. Meaning, in his view, is not discovered like a hidden treasure. Even in suffering, people can find meaning through love, through faith, through work, through resistance. This view reframes the entire question. Maybe the meaning of life is not a single answer waiting to be uncovered. Maybe it is a field of possibilities, shaped by choices, relationships, experiences, and values. Maybe each person must answer it not once, but over and over, as circumstances shift and understanding deepens. Meaning is not a destination at the end of a long search. It is a construction site, always under development. It is made in moments, in acts of courage, in small kindnesses, in wonder, in sacrifice, in the quiet persistence of living well, despite uncertainty. To ask the meaning of life is not simply to ask about the structure of the cosmos. It is to ask about priorities, commitments, hopes, and fears. It is to ask what matters most. What are people willing to fight for, to protect, to create, to become? These are not abstract puzzles. They are the foundation of how people live, how they love, how they mourn, how they dream. And maybe, in the end, there is no universal answer that applies to everyone. Maybe there does not need to be. The most honest response might also be the most empowering. The meaning of life is the meaning people give it. That meaning can be shallow or profound, but it is theirs to make, and in the act of making it, they affirm the possibility of purpose, even in a world that offers no final guarantees. The future of humanity. What lies ahead for humanity is no longer a question reserved for science fiction or distant speculation. It is a pressing concern that unfolds in real time. The pace of technological change, the fragility of the natural world, and the increasing interconnectedness of global systems have converged to make the future of the human species a subject of immediate relevance. People stand at a threshold, surrounded by possibilities that range from breathtaking advancement to existential collapse. The stakes are no longer theoretical. They are practical, ethical, and deeply personal. What kind of world will be left behind? What kind of beings will inhabit it? And how should people act now to shape what is to come? In the past, philosophers asked what it means to be human. That question remains vital. It is not only a question of essence, but of endurance and transformation. Human beings have always changed socially, culturally, technologically, but the changes underway now challenge the boundaries of what it even means to be human. With the rise of artificial intelligence, gene editing, brain-computer interfaces, synthetic biology, and the prospect of space colonization, people are entering a phase of development where they might not simply evolve might redesign themselves. The tools once imagined only in myths or dreams have begun to take form in laboratories and policy discussions. The future is no longer a distant horizon. It is an approaching presence. Transhumanists, they see technology as an extension of evil. Why accept aging, disease, limited cognition, or emotional suffering if they can be overcome? They envision a future where people enhance memory, intelligence, mood, and lifespan. Some imagine uploading consciousness into machines, merging with artificial intelligence, or living in digital worlds. This is not fantasy to them. It is destiny. It is the logical next step in humanity's journey from animal to agent. But not everyone shares this optimism. Critics warn of profound dangers. If only the wealthy can afford to augment themselves, the gap between the privileged and the rest may become unbridgeable. There may be a new caste system, not based on wealth alone. Those who are not enhanced may be marginalized, and even if enhancement is widely available, it raises further questions. What happens to the concept of human nature? What anchors morality when people begin to shed the very traits that once defined their species? At the same time, the natural world is in crisis. Climate change threatens not only ecosystems, but the infrastructure and stability of human civilization. Melting ice caps, rising sea levels, collapsing biodiversity, and intensifying weather patterns are not distant forecasts. They are unfolding realities. These disruptions challenge more than science and technology. They challenge ethics. They force people to reconsider their relationship with the earth. Can humanity shift from a posture of domination to one of stewardship? Can short-term profit be set aside in favor of long-term survival? The climate crisis is not just an environmental issue. It is a test of values. The complexity of these challenges has led some to advocate for stronger global governance. Problems like pandemics, nuclear proliferation, and artificial intelligence do not respect national borders. They demand coordinated solutions. But the move toward global structures raises fears as well about the erosion of cultural identity, about centralized power, about the loss of democratic control. The future may require a new political imagination. Meanwhile, space exploration offers both hope and caution. The idea of becoming a multiplanetary species captures the imagination. It offers the promise of survival beyond Earth, of spreading life to other worlds, of escaping the limitations and dangers of one planet. But it also invites reflection. Will they export the same patterns of exploitation, conflict, and inequality? Or will the vastness of space inspire a new humility, a deeper sense of responsibility? In the face of all this, it is tempting to search for a single answer, a unified vision of the future. But the reality is more likely to be plural. The future of humanity may resemble a branching tree, not a straight line. Different communities, some may embrace augmentation. Others may return to simpler, more sustainable ways of life. Some may migrate to digital or extraterrestrial environments. Others may remain rooted in the soil of Earth. Evolution may no longer be a biological process alone, but a mosaic of choices, tools, and ideologies. Looking ahead, the central philosophical question may no longer be only how to live well, but how to continue living at all. What does it mean to survive with integrity, to flourish without leaving others behind, to invent without forgetting what it means to be human? These are not questions that will be answered through data alone. They require vision. They require ethics. They require imagination. They ask people to act, not just for themselves, but for generations yet to come. The future is not predetermined. It is being shaped day by day by decisions both large and small. Each act of care, each policy made, each technology developed or restrained becomes part of the architecture of tomorrow. The responsibility is immense. Humanity may not know exactly what comes next, but it can choose to face the future not with fear, but with courage, and, in doing so, it may write not only a new chapter in its story, but a new kind of story altogether. And now ... Not the end of all wandering, but the end of this particular walk. We have wandered together through the great questions, some quietly waiting in the folds of your own breath. No answers were demanded. Only a space was made for reflection. Perhaps you feel heavier. Perhaps something inside you is more still. Good. Let this silence be part of the answer. Let the not knowing be a kind of wisdom. And let your curiosity thank you for being here. Rest well, dear mind. Rest well.